Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to go live. I'm going to just share this out. We're just kicking things off. We're running a little late today. Didn't have this pre-scheduled, so I'm setting it up as we go on the fly. It's been a couple of weeks since I've done a show, so some of my settings are off. But if you're joining us on YouTube or Facebook, go ahead and share it out. And please call the number at the bottom of the screen. I know I didn't give any warnings before we went live tonight. I didn't give any reminders or heads up. So call the number at the bottom of the screen. Let's get your calls on the air. I have some stuff I wanted to talk about tonight. Try to share this out as we go here. We'll get started in just a few minutes. But go ahead and if you can all help me get this, get the word out, and let's get some callers and viewers in here and see what we can do. I already have some people joining. All right, we're going to get started here in a few minutes. I know we're running a little late. Let's get some callers on the line. 917-889-9924. 917-889-9924. Let's get some callers on the line, and we'll get started in a few minutes. And if anybody watching can help me share this out, I want to get some as much attention on here as we can today. I know it's been a couple of weeks, but I am back. Wow, we have a lot of callers on already. Just pulled the switchboard up. Awesome. All right, we'll get started here in just another couple of minutes. Beautiful. Let's at least get it in the relevant groups here. If you all can help me share it out, and we will get going. And then I will edit some of this after the fact. But it was either this or you can listen to futuristic space music or whatever I do for my pre-roll here. So you can watch me just get the show set up tonight. Awesome. All right. I know there are a lot of you out there that have questions and comments for me because I have hundreds of messages in my Facebook page inbox. So it's nearly impossible for me to respond to everybody that way, but I will give you this time to ask me in person. If you want to ask a question, call the number 917-889-9924 and press 1 at the bottom of your screen. Awesome. And thank you, Gary, for sharing that out. All right. Let me just pause this. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. This is Trucking with Authority. I'm your host, Kenny Long, and for the next hour, consider me your navigator on your journey to success in business, namely the trucking business. We can talk about anything here on this show, from getting started as a driver to buying your first truck, leasing to a carrier, changing carriers, getting your own authority. We can even talk about what it takes to become a broker, and of course, dealing with brokers, finding freight, working the load boards, negotiating with direct shippers, just negotiation tactics in general. We can talk about dealing with the FMCSA, record-keeping requirements, insurance requirements. That's going to be a big topic here in the next couple of weeks. I'll see if we can get some insurance professionals Brad Allen from Hadley and Leiden has volunteered to come back on the show again. We'll bring him on here next week or a couple weeks after. I need to follow up with him on that. But you name it, we can talk about it here on this show. So call the number at the bottom of your screen if you're watching the live feed, 917-889-9924. If you're on the line, go ahead and press number 1. Looks like we have a lot of callers on. We already have some hands raised in the phone room here, and I will get to those questions. Now, Elizabeth had to drive to Tallahassee today, 250-mile trip to go get license plates. So the state of Florida doesn't make anything easy. You have to go physically. Tallahassee is one of the few places where you can get everything you need. So it's 250 miles roughly from Orlando to get up there. She's still in the car, which means she's not here to screen calls today. So if you are on the line, I will bring you on with your area code. So if you can just give me your name and where you're at, and we'll get right to your questions. But just keep in mind, there will not be a caller screener tonight. So when I bring you on, you are live right off the bat. And I don't know why we have audio over here, but let's get rid of that. All right. So I have a few things I wanted to talk about over the past couple of weeks. I did a little impromptu live video driving into work the other day because one of the top questions that I have right now, and this tends to be a typical trend this time of year, and especially when rates are as good as they are. Now, I know there's a lot of discussion about how rates are falling. Rates are dropping. The sky is falling. The earth is ending. And it couldn't be further from the truth. You know, DAT trend line still shows vans, which are always at the bottom of the spectrum. I like to pay attention to those. They're kind of the low end of the totem pole. They are the general freight movers out there. They are still, for 2 weeks running now, averaging $2.16 per mile, which is a phenomenal average. And I remember just hoping that all of 2015, 16, and 17, I just wanted to see rates over $2 per mile. We were down, in the mid $1.50, $1.70 average range just a year and a half ago. So these rates that we're seeing right now, even though they may have plateaued and we may be seeing a little bit of a roller coaster up and down, which very mild, if that, but the rates we are seeing right now are still phenomenal. We still have awesome opportunities up there. What we have to be careful about and pay attention to is what the markets are doing. There's a lot of driving forces in the market. The number one this time of the year, the biggest driving force in the market is the weather and what comes along with the weather, which is the harvest season. So right now we're starting to see the southern markets, the southern tips of Florida, down near Homestead, Miami, Florida, and Laredo, Texas, El Paso, Texas, the southern markets. Produce is coming across the border. Watermelons are starting to ripen in the fields. We are starting to ship some stuff in the southern markets. It will start bringing the rates up in those areas. As it starts to bring the rates up in those, what typically throughout the rest of the year are horrible markets, that means it sucks the capacity out from the rest of the country. So you start to see drastic changes in what the market does with rates, with capacity. Supply and demand drives everything. And with rates, we're seeing the other effects of supply and demand. It's starting to catch up now because it's not just supply and demand of the trucks. You have to understand it's the supply and demand of the products and what the shipping costs do to these products. So a year ago, if you could hire a truckload to bring up your load of widgets, and it might be $1,000 a year ago, but now it's $1,500, you might think twice about buying a truckload of widgets. Widgets might not be worth that to you. Now, granted, if you average out the few $100s or a few $1,000s even over the 45,000 pounds of freight that might be on the trailer, it's pennies per pound, but it raises the cost of the goods. So yes, supply and demand absolutely drives the market in every way. On the most basic level, where do we have the most loads and the most trucks? And that ratio of loads to trucks. Where are the trucks? Where are the loads? Supply and demand drives it at that level. But beyond that, the prices that we can afford to pay these trucks and the supply and demand of the products. How bad do you need the load of manure? How bad do you need that versus how much are you willing to pay for that super high value load of diamonds, right? So there's a supply and demand that plays into everything. So we got to pay attention to what the markets are doing at all times. In the beginning of the year, the first quarter of the year set records. We're still setting records right now in almost every segment. Flatbed has been unbelievably good. Reefer set bumped $3 per mile earlier this year. We're still at averages that we haven't seen in years. All segments are absolutely fantastic. You just have to know where to be and where to position your capacity. It's also a phenomenal time to be making sales calls to direct shippers. So understand that. Money is there. The opportunity to build those relationships is there. And it's obvious. But my warning the other day was be extremely careful. We are in a very volatile market. It spiked in just a few weeks. We saw rapid increases in a few weeks, and you never know what the future will hold. I say that to say this. In my little 10 or 15-minute video I did driving into work the other day, I mentioned that I get a lot of questions, a lot of how-tos from everything in this business. How do I get started? How do I grow? What do I do next? The step-by-step process. And in some of the Facebook groups, I have a lot of discussions about that. I have some how-to lists and files and things in the Facebook groups. If you go to Trucking with Authority, how to get your own authority, those types of things. My overall theme, since I've been doing the Trucking with Authority show back in 2014, so we're working on 4 years now. Since I've been doing this show, my theme has been understand the business better. Learn how to take the next step. And when you can do that, and you understand what it takes to take the next step, there are certain levels in this industry where, because of the nature of this business, a lot of people have blinders on. What I mean by that is, company drivers think there's a lot of money and it's mailbox money to just go buy a truck and become an owner-operator. Owner-operators think that they can just go spend $1,000, get their own authority, jump into it, and it's mailbox money. It's easy to make that much more money. My position has always been, in some respects, that's absolutely true. But you have to know what you're doing to take that next step. You have to understand what you're getting into. That's what I've tried to help people with since we've started this show. What I'm seeing right now is a lot of dangerous activity happening. Dangerous things. Dangerous for the business owner, the owner-operator that may be getting their own authority, because I've helped people literally weeks or just a few months ago step up and get their own authority. Ask the most basic of questions, which is absolutely fine. I'm here to answer questions. That's what this show is about. That's what we're all about. That's what I want everyone to do. Ask questions. But it's apparent when they ask the most basic of questions, how do I do the most basic thing, that they are still at the most elementary level of their business, which is absolutely fine. We all have to start somewhere. I encourage that. I also see people in a very dangerous position of paycheck to paycheck type business planning, or no business plan at all, just paycheck to paycheck, hope for the next best thing that comes around. Those people, I've had people say, what factoring company do I have to sign up with? Their thoughts on it are they must sign up with a factoring company. They are led by the the slick-haired type salespeople that own these factoring companies. I don't know how a better, more politically correct way to put it. They're led to believe they must factor, as if it is a requirement to become a carrier that you must factor. They ask me, how do I factor? What do I need to do to start my business? And I've explained to several people, and this is just in the past few weeks, I've explained you don't have to factor. As a matter of fact, let's lay out a plan on how you can prevent factoring. Factoring is expensive. Factoring has a lot of risk. There's a lot of things that factoring companies will do to your business that might make it difficult for you to grow in the future. There's a lot of limitations that being involved with the wrong factoring company can do. And I've had people not take my advice. Go factor because they are living that paycheck to paycheck lifestyle. They don't have any other way to do it. They jump in with a factoring company. Now they're just barely getting by. If they so much as get a flat tire, they could be out of business. But that factoring company's got their back. I've had some of these people tell me that they signed on with certain factoring companies because that factoring company gave them a credit with their tire program. Because without that credit for their tire program, a flat tire would put them out of business. That's how close to being out of business they are. But they've got their own authority. They've taken that next step. They've got opportunity. I've seen people borrow money, either with a factoring company or take out loans or borrow from their friends or family just to finance basic truck repairs, basic operational costs. Those same people right now are trying to add owner-operators, trying to buy a second truck, but not buy, somehow lease through some kind of backdoor method to lease and sublease and hire drivers to put in their trucks. That was my warning in the car driving to work the other day. That's so dangerous. Dangerous for not just the people that are leasing to them, leasing to a company that doesn't understand the business, doesn't understand contracts, doesn't understand the risks they're getting into, doesn't understand the insurance requirements, doesn't understand the business they're getting into, doesn't understand the bill of lading, the proper procedures for how claims work. They don't understand any of that because they haven't done it before. They expect it won't happen. I had somebody just the other day tell me that, they're at no risk right now because they get all of their bills signed, their proof of delivery signed that says all received and no damages. They get all of their bills signed. That's fantastic, and that will help you a lot if somebody later down the road says that there was a claim on that load. What happens, though, when there actually is a claim on that load? It's easy to get somebody to sign that paper when there actually is no claims, when there's nothing damaged. When you deliver the freight on time, you deliver it completely, the trailer's, no damage, sealed, everything, and you get them to sign it like that, that's fantastic. What happens when you actually have a claim? You have a pallet fall over. You have, God forbid you're in an accident. You have a claim of some sort, freight loss. You have damages. You damage property, not just the freight, but what happens if you're backing into a dock and you damage the truck next to you, or you damage the building of the shipper or receiver. Something happens and you have a claim. They're not going to sign off received in full, no damages, because there are damages now. You're at risk. And if you can't absorb the risk of just one single load, you're out of business. And so is everybody that works for you. And if you work for a company like that, I mean, it's a free country, but I don't know that that's the best situation to be in. I just want to warn everybody that right now, the opportunity to make money with the phenomenal rates, it's just absolutely phenomenal, just amazing opportunity out there, just absolutely amazing. But people that win the lottery tend to be bankrupt within the first few years after winning millions of dollars. And I think the same thing will happen with the phenomenal rates that we're seeing right now. There's money to be made. You could fall out of your truck and bump your head on a bucket full of money. But you could also be bankrupt in just a few weeks. Just a few things happen and you're out of business. Now, that's not to say you might be a multi-million-dollar company with really deep pockets. You could have a risk and a claim and something could happen and you could be out of business as well. But at least you understand, and at least there's some financial backing, and at least there's some comprehension of the risk that's involved. But these companies that can just barely survive on their own, that are trying to grow a fleet, I caution those owner-operators, those companies, those business owners from doing it too rapidly. There is a time to do it, and I encourage people to do it when the time is right, absolutely. But be careful, and if you're leasing on, be careful as well. All right. I want to jump into a different topic now. I think we've had some time for people to get on the line. We've got several people watching the stream. see if I can pull the live feed up and make sure I follow along with the comments. All right. Have a call on the line already, so let's jump right to the phone calls. If you're listening in, if you'd like to join the show tonight, go ahead and press number 1 on your keypad once you call in. The number at the bottom of the screen, 917-889-9924. We're going to go to the 630 area code, 630 area code. I'm going to bring you on live. We don't have a call screener tonight, so be prepared. Welcome to the show. 630, are you with us? Six 630. And this is why we have to have a call screener. All right, nobody there at the 630 area code. If you're on the line, go ahead and press number 1 if you have any questions or comments. We have more people watching the live stream than we have on the phones, but I didn't really advertise the show tonight. So go ahead and call in. I recognize a few of the numbers on the line already. Looks like some of our owner-operators are calling in and listening in as well. Awesome. All right. Tonight's show, my overall topic really was rolling with the punches. Nothing goes right in business. I think that's the number 1 rule in business. Rule number 1 of business is expect the worst. One of my owner-operators, Jason, says, well, we'll just plan for the worst, and if something goes right, we'll work it in. I love that comment because that's pretty much how business should be run. Always plan for the worst. Always be ready for the worst. Make it happen. Everything will go wrong. Plan for it. If something goes right, work it in. Now, that's the nature of business, and if you are the best problem solver out there, you will rise to the top. You will be the best solution for your customers. Being a problem solver in business, especially in a business like the trucking business where it is a commodity-driven market, anybody can go out there and buy a truck and a trailer and be in business tomorrow. Anybody. You don't even have to have a CDL. In most states, you can buy a truck and a trailer and literally never have driven a truck before. Go take the road test. No schools required, no class, nothing. A written test. In a few hours, you could have your CDL. And a few days, you could be in business, ready to go to work. Because that bar is set so low, this is a commodity market. There is very little that one truck can do better than the next. There's very little that differentiates one trucking company from the next. If you can find what that is and become a problem solver, you will stand out to your customers. Now, I want to talk about some of the major things that went wrong in our business this week. And I'm hoping that Jason can give us a call because he was a part of this. So today, this weekend rather, we our RGN truck went to pick up a load. And no, it was not the RGN or what have you that was on the news in Nashville, although that played a part in the problems that we had. So Jason picked up this load in Arkansas, bound for Florida, by way of Tennessee. As soon as, and it was an overheight load, and as soon as that little incident happened in Nashville, had absolutely nothing to do with us. It couldn't have been prevented by us. It had absolutely zero, there was absolutely zero that we could do about it. There was nothing we could do to plan for it. We booked a load out of Arkansas. We pulled the permits, put all the applications in for all of the different states that we were driving through. Just about the time that we got all the permits and all the applications submitted, and we got the notice that the load was secured on the trailer, the permit company called and said, Tennessee is having a problem. I said, well, what is the problem? Well, watch the news. just about any channel, Google it, Nashville, Tennessee, what happened? And of course we Googled that, and we see a truck stuck under a bridge. Tore that bridge about down. It was a pretty pathetic thing to do for that trucking company. It'll likely put them out of business. They'll be bankrupt. They'll be buying that bridge. They'll probably be paying for a lot of the traffic control for, the months to come following that incident. Again, that insurance company can't pay for that. There is no way to have that much insurance. It's going to be tens of millions of dollars. Hopefully not into the 3-digit, hundreds of millions, but it's up there. That's an expensive bridge. When that happened, Tennessee stopped issuing oversized and overdimensional permits. They just shut that down and focused all their efforts on looking at what's going on in, why did they issue a permit, or what happened? Why did this truck hit this bridge? Meanwhile, Patriot Star has a truck in Arkansas bound for Florida, and it has to stop and wait for the weekend because it happens. You have to plan for the worst. Now, the rate that we got on this typical run, it wasn't a typical run. This particular run, the rate that we got on this run was enough to justify the time involved. It was enough to justify sitting there for a couple of days. Although it would have been nice not to have to. We were able to stomach the problems. Because it was an oversized, overdimensional load, there were some states, Tennessee and Georgia, that you can't run on the weekends. You can only run half days on Saturday and Sunday in the state of Florida. So it actually didn't cost us a whole lot of time. He should actually be able to deliver that load, maybe just one day late. But if that was something that would have put us out of business, if that was something that because we were just one day late and maybe we missed our reload out of Miami, or something happened and we turned around and dropped the load back off with the shipper. If something happened, we didn't handle it properly, that broker and that customer probably would have red flagged us for not knowing what we're doing, not being able to handle the problems, not being able to overcome the unexpected. That was absolutely out of the ballpark of anything that we could control. But you have to be able to overcome the unexpected. There's no way to know that another truck is going to tear the roads down, literally tear the roads down. What do? You might be stuck in traffic. You might be stuck because of a load issue. Don't make it somebody else's fault. Handle it. Take care of it. Let me see here. I don't know if we're having issues with the phones. I know the one caller I brought on, there was nothing. So maybe we're having phone issues. But if you're on the line, go ahead and press 1 if you have any questions or comments. I know Jason said that he was going to call in and comment on that as well. Hopefully he gets a chance. So other issues that may come up on the loads. The load will not be what you expect it to be. If you are going to a new shipper, a new receiver, if you're working with a new broker, if the broker is working with a new customer, when you go to pick that load up, they hired a truck to move something. Beyond that, it's out of everyone's control. When you arrive, solve that problem. We had a driver that just today arrived, and a shipper had poorly packaged products. And I know for a fact other drivers would have turned the load down, turned it back in, probably would have refused to haul the load. It was definitely something that was tossed around. My driver thought about trying to do something like that. And the broker, we worked it out with them. We solved the issue. We managed to get the load moved. And now we will be the go-to company for that particular customer, for that broker. I know Dave Casanova, another one of our trucks earlier this year. He was actually on the show. He talked about how one of the customers that the broker he was working with had a load of windows. And when they got to the other end, the trucks that they normally hired to haul this particular load didn't have the proper way to secure the shipment. And windows were being broken. They weren't able to haul enough on any particular truck. And so when Dave found out about this, he ran the first load with his normal equipment, did everything he could to try to figure out how to solve that problem, and he went and got special E-Track put in his trailer just to be able to handle that particular customer. Make sure that he could solve the problem for the customer. And for that, for the next several months, that customer made Dave a dedicated carrier for them to handle that particular run every single time. And it worked out fantastic because he solved the problem. And I'd love to hear how some of you, and I think the phones are working. Go ahead and call the number 917-889-9924. Press number 1. I don't have a call screener. I think that's the problem. Elizabeth normally handles that. But I will bring you on by area code. I know that first call, I think I dropped it by mistake, so that may have been my own fault. I think I can manage this, though. What have you all done? What have you done to solve problems for your customer? So I'll bring up some other things that I have encountered myself. I was having a discussion with one of the YouTubers that I follow, and his thoughts on the trucking business is it's a commodity, and he's all about knowing your rate per mile, your cost per mile, which is a good way to run your business. But when you get into that mindset and you focus on being a commodity driver, you end up focusing on more miles. Miles equals money. So my discussion with this particular YouTuber was to become more of a problem solver and stop focusing on the miles and start focusing on solving problems. When you start focusing on solving problems, the miles don't matter anymore because you get paid more than the mileage can justify. One of the things that I did once, that Elizabeth and I did when we were teaming together, we had a shipment that moved into Pennsylvania. We had another shipment booked behind that one. Mind you, at the time we were teaming, so everything was, back to back. And it was after hours, and the customer did not have a way to unload the shipment. It was going to a brand new building, and it was mortar for the floor tiles and things. They didn't even have the floors completed. The loading dock didn't have the dock levelers in there yet. They had the little notches cut out, but they didn't even have the concrete poured in front of the loading dock. So going to the loading dock wasn't an option. The forklift that they had there was locked up by the neighbor business at 5 p.m. and this was after hours. So we made arrangements to have a rollback wrecker come out. And that rollback wrecker, when we told them what the issue was, we were going to move these pallets with a pallet jack off the back of the truck onto this rollback wrecker and lower it to the ground so we could move it around with a pallet jack. That would have been long, hard, tedious work. But we solved that problem for the customer. Now let's take that a step further. We told the wrecker company what we were trying to do, and he said, well, wait a minute, I have a forklift. And so not only did he come out with his wrecker, he brought a forklift with him. And he put the forklift in the back of put the forklift on the ground, put a pallet jack inside the trailer, and instead of trying to roll these out onto the rollback wrecker, we were able to roll them back to the back of the trailer, unload them with a forklift, and take them around to the side of the building where they needed to be. We solved that problem for the customer, thought outside of the box. Now, this gentleman that I was having this discussion with said, well, it's great that you solved that problem, but it sounds like other people in the supply chain are not doing their job. What he said was the broker should have arranged that. Other people are not doing their job. What he said was, no, that is not my job. It's not my job to solve problems. When you have that thought process, when you think to yourself, it's not my job to solve your problems, You pigeonhole yourself into the commodity market. If you don't want to step outside of that commodity market, don't try. If you want to exceed and be better than the rest of the crowd, try harder. So, not my job should not be in any business owner's vocabulary to say somebody else should have done it. I'm going to point my fingers and say it was their fault. They're the reason we had these problems. It's not my job. Somebody else should have done their job. It's not my job. You can't have a successful business and think that way. All right, so we have some phone calls on. Let's give this a shot. Let's make sure we got this all turned up here. We're going to go to the 203 area code. 203, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kenny, I heard my name. It's Dave Casanova.
Hey, Dave, there you are.
Hey, got a question for you. This has to do with the team that we know. They're over at Landstar, and they're doing about $9,000 a week. And I was trying to make an argument for why it makes better sense to go from 65% to 80%, at least to a carrier, running the load board. As far as I can tell, the opportunities would be greater on the out on the open market. It's just a little bit more challenging to find team freight. What are your opinions on that?
I agree with you. I think it is a little more challenging to find team freight because team freight, they tend to try to book that on carriers that are more consistent with teams. Teams on the open market aren't as easy to get on a dedicated account, so to speak. So there are carriers out there that all they do is specialize in teams, and a lot of times those brokers call those companies. That being said, team freight does hit the load boards from time to time. Also, when there's a team involved, the days of the strong solo are gone. That ended December 18th, 2017. Strong solos, which means somebody that could pencil whip their logs on paper, that doesn't exist anymore. So there are a lot of opportunities for the 7, 8, 900-mile runs that a team could pick up and deliver next day. Even 12 to 1,400 miles if they wanted to run, hard. They could pick up in the morning and deliver the following morning legally, whereas a solo can't do that. So there is a bit of a misunderstanding that a team should always get paid more. A team could justify a higher rate if it's required to have a team. They could justify a higher rate for expedited freight. But a team could make a lot more money running a truck, even running solo freight, if they just adjust delivery times. Run at typical solo rates, so to speak, but be able to get twice as many of those in a week. So a team truck could be a lot more profitable. Now, as far as going from the 65% carriers to the open market, and it doesn't matter if you're a solo or a team, I think one of the disadvantages to being leased to one of those carriers is you're pigeonholed into only using their freight. Now, I know which carrier you're talking about, and you used to be over there as well, and we looked and discovered that they only have about 35% direct freight. So even if that 65%, there's still 65% of it is coming off the load boards anyhow. It's co-brokered in some form or fashion anyhow. So right there, you've got a 15% increase in the rate that you'll get. So you have opportunity. The other opportunity is you probably can get most of the same freight from that particular broker, but you also, when you end up in desolate areas where that particular broker or that agent, the carrier does not have freight, you can cut down your deadhead. So cutting down your deadhead, especially with a team, cutting down your deadhead is huge. If you can keep the wheels turning, which a team is good at, and keep it always profitable, cutting your deadhead is one of the biggest ways to increase your bottom line. So moving from 65 to 80% is huge, especially when the majority of your freight at 65%, it comes from the same markets, from other brokers. Cutting down your deadhead is another way to do that. And then as a team, to be able to fill the need, the gap, where the super solos, the strong solos used to try to to make it work on paper. There's still a big call for that, and there are still a lot of brokers out there that don't understand some of the hours of service issues that we're all faced with right now. So I think there is a big call for team, even though a broker may not see it that way.
I was kind of thinking the same thing. Looking at the numbers at the 65%, even if you went to 72 and had your own trailer and then just jumped up to 80%, transitioning from 65% to 80 and paying $1,000 a month for a trailer, $800 a month, maintenance, everything included, I think you can go from 9,000 to about 11,000 a week. I'm not 100% certain how long it would take to do that. How long did it take you to hit the ground running when you were running team with Elizabeth?
Honestly, if they're running team now with what they're doing, they would hit the ground running probably from day one. It's really not that difficult. The hardest part about running team is learning how to run the truck. Dispatching the truck doesn't change a whole lot. So the freight's out there, and it's not that difficult to book the truck and keep the truck profitable. I think 11,000 going from 9 to 11 is an underestimate. I think we have a few solo trucks that are bumping that 9,000 mark.
Yeah, they're running flatbed though, but I agree. I mean, I was looking at 11 would be like, if I was running team out in the open market, that'd be like my first goal. So, I'm hoping he's listening because I think it makes sense. The only downside is, his wife so she's got about a year before she can move, before they can move the truck, unless they get their own authority. So that was one question I had. And the other question was detentions and stuff like that. Because I had to change my lanes, now I'm looking at doing other things. And now I'm starting to run into a lot of detentions and different things that I'm not getting hit for, that I'm not getting paid for. The load I'm on today, I sat, 3 hours, 5 hours total, get $35 an hour after 2. I asked for a rate confirmation with the updated detention, and they said, oh, no, we're going to wait until it's all done. Is there a way to make an argument that says, well, that's great, that's an issue between you and your shipper, but I'm contracted with you, please send the rate con. Is that something you would do?
Yeah, and that is a good argument.
Have it negotiated already?
That is a good argument. I think because you are kind of moving into a bit of a new style of operation, I think we can work on the way you negotiate that. When you start working with a lot of brokers and shippers that deal with, more warehouse type work and things where you're going to have more detention and possibilities of detention, negotiating the detention rate up front when you first book the load is more and more important. So you know exactly what you get, because after the fact, it's very difficult. So the reason that I like to negotiate it rather than try to have it in some type of a contract pre-negotiated is because it gives you a little bit more flexibility, not just on the rate itself, but to understand more about what the broker knows. So in your negotiation, once you book the load, ask how long will it take, to get loaded and unloaded. Now, I can tell you right off the bat, 99% of the brokers are going to say, oh yeah, they're going to get you right in and out, quick, fast, easy, no problem. I do this all the time. That's your cue to say, great, that's fantastic, because I have another customer. Now, just remember that brokers love to rub in that they want to have a backhaul. We get calls all the time. Hey, I have a load going home for Florida, right? And I know, Dave, you live up in Connecticut, and you probably have those calls once in a while. I got a load to get you home to Florida, right? Because the carrier is based in Florida.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So brokers love to be backhaul specialists. If they are your backhaul, that means you have a more important head haul. And when you turn this around on them and say, look, fantastic, you promise that we're going to get in and out of there in an hour or less, quick, fast, and easy, definitely less than 2 hours. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do that load for $1,000, and I will include 2 hours to get loaded and 2 hours to get unloaded. After that, I need $100 an hour. When you say $100 an hour, they're going to say, oh, there's no way I can do that. This customer will never pay that much. And you'll say, well, that's okay, because you already told me that we're going to get in and out of there quickly. You already promised me that this customer is fast. There's no doubt in your mind, right? because you've already got them to say that. Now you turn it around on them. They say, well, I can't do this or that. And you can say, well, why not? You just told me. I mean, do you not know? Do they not? You don't have a good relationship with this customer. You don't know how long it'll take to get loaded. And of course, you have to be nice about this. You have to be politically correct about it. But once you do that, that gives you a sense of, do they really know if you'll have a lot of detention on either end? If they know for a fact that you'll be in and out of there quickly, they don't have any problem putting it on the rate confirmation. If they don't want to put it on the rate confirmation, chances are you'll have a lot of detention, and you need to be aware of that. And at that point, you can decide, well, if there's going to be a lot of detention, maybe I don't want to take this load. Because remember, you have a more important head haul to get to. So use that as your negotiation. I find that seems to be one of the better ways to make it work in your favor. I don't really want the detention. I just want to get the truck in and out of there quickly. The other thing you can do is, fine, we don't need detention. I'll do this load. You have the option. I'll do this load for $1,000. I'll include 2 hours of loading and unloading time, and then it's $100 an hour after that. Or I'll do this load for $1,100, and I'll include 3 hours of loading and unloading time, right? So you can just include it in the rate. It's not detention anymore. It's part of the rate. There's no such thing.
Yeah, I did that with.
There's no such thing as free time.
With TQL. Sorry.
Yeah, and I remember when you did it too. There is no such thing as free time. There's no such thing as deadhead. There's no such thing as free time. You're paid for all of your time, and you are paid for all of the miles you drive, empty or loaded. It's just a matter of, are they paying you more if you wait longer? So all of that money that you got paid, they're paying you to sit there, but they're not paying you enough, and you have to draw that line. Because rate confirmations, you wouldn't go haul a load. You wouldn't go from point A to point B and then ask for the rate confirmation after the fact. So the same thing with detention. Let's start getting that detention up front. I think that it's becoming more and more important. And I'll tell you another thing about detention and why you're starting to see more of it. Excuse me. All right, good thing I have a volume button on that microphone. Shippers don't understand detention. We have several shippers that we work with, and we've told them, look, you're going to hold them up for 4 hours. We're going to have to charge you $50 an hour after the first 2 hours. Now, we've had them say, no. We booked this truck exclusive use. And we've had to explain to shippers before, you don't understand. You're holding this truck up. If this truck arrived to you 2 hours late, you'd be upset. So if you're holding them 2 hours up on your end, that's going to make them 2 hours late to their next customer. So we have to be compensated for that difference, or we have to get them out of there quickly. When we explained it to that shipper, they understood. A lot of shippers have a misunderstanding of how the truck works and what they're paying for and what they get for that. It's the broker's job to explain it to them. A lot of brokers don't take the time to explain it to them, and what they do on the flip side is, let's say that they think they can hire a truck for $1,000 to go from point A to point B. Their markup on that might be, let's say, 10%. So they try to go to the customer for $1,100. But then they stop and they don't want to explain how detention works. So instead of $1,100, they go and they say, I'm going to need $1,200. They only expect to make $100. If they can make it, if they can make $100 and pay you $1,100, that's fine with them. It's a bonus to them if they can get you in and out of there quickly and make $200 on that load. But that detention time oftentimes comes out of the broker's pocket. It really does. The broker factors that into the rate they charge their customer. If they don't have to pay detention, it's more of a bonus to them. But a lot of times the customer, and so when they say that the customer is just not going to pay it, well, I know the customer is not going to pay it because you never asked them for it. You don't have that in your contract. You never explained to them that they have to get the truck in and out in 2 hours. We need to talk to them about it beforehand.
So that goes back to my original question. On this particular shipper, it's 590 miles, 1945 is what I got running up to Connecticut. It's a pretty strong rate, I feel, out of Virginia. But it was first come, first serve on both ends. That's why I negotiated some sort of detention after 2 hours, regardless that it was first come, first serve. But because the rate was so strong, I was okay with $35 an hour. Instead of putting it on the rate con, they sent a separate email, and I'm assuming that covers us. my concern is instead of sticking firm, I sent them a copy of the BOL with the in and out times, and I wanted a reconfirmation for the detention at the shipper while I was there, and they want to take care of it on the end. But just having that email saying that they'll pay after 2 hours, is that enough?
Well, having it in writing is definitely in our favor. Having, working this stuff out ahead of time. Anytime you get something in writing, you can use that against them. So an email is better than a verbal confirmation. It's better to have it written on a rate confirmation. But with an email, I'm sure that we could probably get paid on it. I'm absolutely sure that probably we could get paid on it.
All right. We'll see what happens. That was it, Kenny.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for calling in. And excuse me, I keep turning the microphone down because I'm coughing, and I've had a scratchy throat and a little stuffed up in the past few days, but I'll try to muscle through it here. We've got a couple more calls we'll get to, and we'll wrap things up for the night. We're going to go to right at the top of the hour. Let me skip down a couple here. We're going to go to the 407 area code. I suspect I know who this is, a 407 area code. Welcome to the show. How can we help you?
Hey, Kenny. How you doing this evening?
Great. How can we help you?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I just want to go what Dave was asking about the team stuff. I'm actually running teams, obviously out of the Orlando area, and we're actually grossing about 15,000 on a 7-day period right now. And what I'm finding is, and you touched on it, was moving the appointment times. That's where I'm having the most of my success with the team stuff. Like I'm going with the longer haul stuff, cross country, and I'm finding when there's a couple more days out from a normal delivery, the brokers and the shippers and receivers are more willing to move that appointment time. I'm having a lot of success with that, so that's definitely something to think about there. But the main reason for my question, or thing I'm not calling about today, is insurance. So I have a friend of mine who just got his license 3 months ago, went in and bought a truck. And I'm trying to help him out. And I suggested to him potentially coming under my DOT, and I would sort of help him get his teeth into it, show him how to negotiate a bit, and sort of he can go out on himself. And I suggested, hey, get your own DOT number. And at least that's going to be somewhat, it's now you've applied for it and you've got it, and it's running now. But
90 seconds.
I got a phone call from my insurance agent saying that you can't have your own DOT number and or your own insurance and run under someone else's DOT number, which seems absolutely crazy to me. Now I don't know if it comes back to something to do with his experience, or what would be a cause of something like that.
No, that's absolutely correct. The whole point of getting an MC number, getting your own authority, is the FMCSA just regulates
60 seconds.
And pay no attention if those of you that can hear the voice counting down the time. When you have another truck running under your authority, it's your responsibility to make sure that they are operating safely. Part of that is to make sure that they are financially able to handle any possible potential losses that you may cause if there's an accident, anything of the sort. Protect the public. FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that's what they do. For the safety of the public, they're making sure that not only are you operating within the regulations of, hours of service and things like that, which is all part of safety, maintaining and tracking to make sure that all the motor carriers
10 seconds.
are also properly insured is a part of that. When you have somebody running under your authority, they have to be on your insurance. That's how it works.
Okay, and that's probably where the experience side comes in. I know I think I use Lancer. I've got a broker out of Winter Park there that I'm using.
Yes.
And they said he just didn't have the experience to be on my insurance. So I was like, well, I sort of understood that being only 3 months in. So now he's going the route of trying to get some quotes and sort of get his pretty much run under his own authority and go that route. But it just seemed weird to me because I'm thinking, well, you could lease someone under your authority, but I figured they could get their own insurance because I didn't want to be burdened with the cost of his insurance as well, knowing that he's so green, you know. But it makes sense what you're saying. Sort of clarified what's happened here then. So,
yeah, and you mentioned the broker out of Winter Park. That is Hadley and Leiden, and that's who I mentioned earlier in the show. I believe Brad Allen is he'll be joining us on the show here in the next week or two. And but yeah, this is one of the things that I asked Brad to talk about. He 3 years ago, and he sent out a letter to everybody. You probably got the same letter. 3 years ago, there were 30 companies that could write insurance right now for trucking companies. Just 3 years ago, there are only 13 insurance companies that currently write insurance policies for trucking companies. Insurance is also supply and demand.
Wow.
There is only 13. We're less than half. More than half of them left the market. So less than half of what we had 3 years ago. Rates are going up. It doesn't matter where you live or what you're doing. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 2014, when I started doing the show, I was telling people that, brand new authorities, you could get in the door, around $10,000. A year later, it was $12,000. Last year, I was talking about $15,000. I just talked to Brad just last week, and right now, new authorities based out of the state of Florida, which is one of the more expensive states, right now, $20,000 to $25,000 in your first year is something that we can expect to see. So somebody with
that's where I'm at. I started last year at the beginning of last year, and I'm right at $19,000.
Yep.
And I've spoke to people in other states. I mean, very similar driving records, just started up, and I mean they're almost halved. And I'm like, damn, do I just want to buy a piece of property in another state and register the business there? That was one of my thoughts. I'm like, is that a legal thing to do to try and cut some of the cost down? I mean, it's also an investment as well, It's
illegal to do it just to avoid the insurance regulations. So you would have to actually base your business there. You would have to pay taxes in that state. You would have to, you'd have to file a foreign corporation out of there. You'd have to get all your license plates out of another state. You would have to have a physical address. Essentially, your business would have to physically be located there. If FMCSA called up and said, hey, I want to come in and I want to do an inspection, that's the address they're going to meet you at. Your insurance company could also send in an inspector to verify and check where your records are. That is one of the downsides to having a business like we have. Any other business, it makes sense. If you ran a supermarket or you run a little convenience store or something, your business and everything that you do, your inventory, all of that is at that address. I have trucks leased to me that have never been in the state of Florida before. I have drivers that I have never met before. They probably never will come to the state of Florida. I'll meet them someday, but it probably won't be here in my office. And to me, when they have insurance rates that are based on where your office location is just ludicrous. But that is how the regulations and laws work. So it is something that's difficult and hard to overcome. I have looked at similar things, moving it, out of the state. The absolute cheapest insurance in the country is in the state of Maine. But I don't want to have to drive all the way to the state of Maine if I have to have an FMCSA audit, right?
Yeah. It sounds like a real headache to do that.
It is, and you'd have to have a physical address set up. You'd have to do all kinds of things, and it's very, very difficult. You also have taxes. I did actually look at one time moving the business to the state of Maine, and if we did that, the first $20,000 they don't have any income tax on, and this may have changed. This was several years ago. First $20,000 there was no income tax on. Then it was something like 10 or 12% after that. Well, that's going to negate any savings I'd have on my insurance, just in the difference in taxes. So, and what I have found in shopping this around, because I've done this research myself, the states that have, lower costs, either tax-wise or lower cost, cost of living expenses and other things that would, be beneficial, that's the states that typically have higher costs of insurance. Florida, we have no income tax. It's a great business state to be in, but our insurance costs are astronomical. On the flip side, you go to Maine, where super cheap insurance, very low risk. Very few people live there, low crime rates, everything. But, super high taxes. You've got horrible, weather conditions and issues like that to deal with, and it's very, very difficult to do business in that state because of it. So, yeah, there's a trade-off everywhere. Finding the correct balance, that's the trick for all of us.
Yeah. Have you ever found a reason why? I mean, what's the reason that the rates are so high? Is it a theft issue? Is it a liability? What makes Florida such a high? I mean, obviously we're more of a risk for some reason, right? I mean, does anyone give you an answer on what that is? I've asked around and I can't seem to get a straight answer on why rates are higher in certain states. I mean,
okay, yeah, there is
an answer to that?
There is a very good answer to that. Florida is a super high risk state. We are a no fault state, which means if you're in a collision, your insurance has to pay for it. That's first of all. You have to have uninsured motorist coverage in the state of Florida. It's required, and there are a lot of uninsured motorists in the state of Florida, unfortunately. So risks there are super high. So for collisions, there's a extremely high risk for insurance companies. Cargo claims are super high. There are a lot of thefts in Florida. There are actually a lot of thefts all across the country, and if they are recovered, more often than not, they're near the port of Miami. They export so much stolen goods that's where everything goes. So the state of Florida is horrible for theft, horrible for collisions and losses. A lot of uninsured motorists in the state of Florida. Auto insurance is super high, so your auto liability is high, and cargo risk here is super high. So then you throw in the fact that, just insurance companies in general in the state of Florida, because most insurance companies that write auto policies, if you look at, your Progressives and even Geico gets into this now. I think Allstate is part, some of those common ones are also huge in the housing insurance market. So last year was a huge hit with all the hurricane damage and things in the state of Florida. So they're raising the prices across the board.
Okay, that makes sense, for sure. Well, I appreciate your time and answering them questions for me, and you have a great evening.
You too, and thank you for the call. All right, we've got a few other calls on. Let me mark these here. Already got a couple of them. All right, I know we're going into overtime. I started a little late, so let's knock these out. I think I know who this one is, too. Let's go to the 423 area code. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Kenny, it's Chris. I got Jason on the conference call. He wanted me to press one for him.
Okay. All right.
If he's still there. I don't think he's there anymore.
All right. Did you have
He's
some?
out there in the middle of nowhere anyway on his way up to Montana. Yeah, other than that, problem solving like what you talked about at the beginning of the show. We booked this load yesterday, and then on my way there, I find out that it was oversized. The funny part about that was, it was picking up from Arcelor Metal, and you would think they would know, but the guy come out and asked me, he's like, what's the deal with this load? He's like, why is it oversized? Is it too long? I said, no, dude. I was like, it's got to be inside the trailer. It can't be sticking out the size of the trailer. It's got to be 102.
And they didn't even
like,
realize
I
that.
didn't know that.
And okay, so
no, and I'm like, how do you not know that? You guys do steel for like 100 years.
And that brings up a good point. The shippers don't always know what they're dealing with. They don't know the regulations. It's not their job to know. It really isn't their job. It would be nice. You would think that they would after doing it for so long, but it's really not their job. It's our job. There's been several times when, we've sent trucks in and I've quoted them and said, look, this is going to be the rate. We were just talking with the load that Jason is on with the RGN that got stuck in Arkansas because he couldn't get the proper permits. When we were quoting that one, we told them, look, it was literally 1 inch from the limit in certain states to have, poll cars and route surveys and things like that because it's oversized, right? 1 inch. And there's no way to know until you get it on the trailer exactly how that's going to sit on the trailer, how it's secured, all that stuff. Things change. So we had to put the stipulation in with the broker. Look, we will do it for such and such rate. Given it will ride, at certain height, it will fit the way it's supposed to. Everything is good. If it changes, you have to cover the additional cost. And, the shippers don't know. And so the thing is, the only reason we questioned it was we had multiple brokers calling us on this load. The first one called and said, they gave us the dimension. They said it's such and such high. Okay, well, that works. That's fine. Then another broker called on the same load. It's the same stuff, and they gave us different dimensions. So now I called back the first broker that we ended up booking it with, and I said, I will do it for this load, but the problem is there seems to be some confusion on the dimensions. And I needed to be absolutely 100% clear because 1 inch changes everything, and we have to know that. Because they don't understand. They just ballpark it. Yeah, that looks about 14 feet tall. That's good enough. Because they don't. It's not their job to know. But when you get out there with a tape measure,
when I was on the phone with you. Yeah, when I was on the phone with you, because they had it written on the steel. It was 106 3/4. So just for the heck of it, I put the tape measure on there, and then in the middle it ends up being 9 foot wide.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, between.
And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's just something that happens when it comes out of the press that way."
Right. Well, and something like that where you could pull the permit for a few inches longer and it wouldn't change much. But if it's something like Jason's load was 14 feet 11 inches. That's close. At 15 feet. He has to, he already had to have a pilot car in the state of Florida, but at 15 feet, 1 inch, not only do you have to have a pilot car, but you also have to have a route survey, which could delay the whole shipment a day. It's, a lot more cost involved. Everything is different. Everything changes. I didn't even look at the provision sheets in all the other states to see, but I suspect that if we needed to do that much extra in Florida, we may have needed pilot cars in other states. We may have needed, things change. 1 inch is different.
Oh, yeah.
So it's absolutely imperative, but the shippers don't know that. They don't understand. And several times we have called, and especially when it comes to this oversized, overdimensional stuff, we have called and explained how and why that, these costs are what they are. We've had, a couple of weeks ago, I know all you guys on the platform side, we were all talking about it, one particular load, and it was, 11.5 or something, a little over 11,000 is what we figured we'd need it at a minimum, and they wanted to be at $7,000, and that was my quote was 11 something, and you wanted to be at 16. I mean, that was from your point of view, it needed to be even higher. So we were all over it, but the broker was like, I can't come off of 6,000 or whatever it was, and we said, look, it's $6,000 just in permits and pilot cars, and it was a super load. And, and the time involved, I mean, we've got more cost than 6,000. You don't even understand. And they didn't. I mean, it was several $1,000s, and just by the time you pull overweight permits and you get arrange, a couple of pilot cars in every state, that all comes with a cost. And it can't be done for some of the rates that they want to do it for.
Yeah, and it was shipping on a Friday. I remember because it was shipping on a Friday. They thought it could transit all weekend long, and then we were looking through that. It couldn't even transit over the weekend.
Right, and then you get some all the time that
they were expecting it there on.
You get some companies that don't understand you can't run at night. The one that Jason was supposed to be on, he wanted it delivered Monday morning in Miami. Well, he wanted it delivered. He wanted them to arrive at 8 a.m. in Miami on Monday morning with an over-dimensional load. Well, between the hours of 7 and 9, you can't drive in Dade County, Florida, which is that whole, southeastern corner of the state. You can't even drive down there with that. So you can't arrive at 8 a.m. You're not allowed in that area at that time. So you'd either have to arrive the night before or you'd have to, show up after. So they don't know the rules. It's our job to make sure. Now, it's easy to see that when you're dealing with, the super loads and overdimensional, oversized stuff because it's very unique, different stuff. And the rules are different than the average stuff. But the same applies with just general freight. They don't know what it takes to move general freight many times. They don't get it. They don't know the rules, regulations. They don't understand hours of service. They don't understand weight limits and, different restrictions that we may have in certain areas. So it's our job as the brokers or the carrier, the drivers, to educate and to explain and to know how that works so that we can properly quote rates. we have to be an expert. You know, you have to be an expert of everything. I did a presentation a few years ago, and that was kind of the point of my presentation. You have to be a know-it-all. You have to be an expert of everything. And, you know, a big name badge that says, "Hi, hello, my name is expert." And I gave an example. When I was a kid, you know, I started driving trucks, working with my dad. He started an excavating company. So I got my CDL to be able to drive a dump truck and pull the bulldozers and backhoes and stuff around. And we started doing oversize, and I got into doing heavy haul and things. And, you know, I remember my dad worked for General Motors, and he had never driven. You know, when we first moved, we kind of lived we lived in Dearborn Heights, which is a suburb of Detroit. We moved about an hour outside of Detroit. And when we moved out there, you know, my dad didn't know anything about driving tractors or anything. He bought like this oversized lawn tractor and about tore a tree down with it, right? Just ran it into stuff. You know, and so here we are a couple years later, and he's buying bulldozers and backhoes and stuff. And I remember he would get out of the truck, and he'd walk over, and he had one of those green Stanley thermoses, and he'd stand there, and he'd pour his cup of coffee, and he'd be talking to the customer, and the customer would say, "Well, you know, I got to have this done, and my dad would just look at it. And I was only 8 or 10 years old at the time, and I remember thinking, he has no idea what he's doing, but the customer never knew it. I promise you, he would get out and he would strike a pose holding his Stanley, you know, thermos and his little cup of coffee. He'd sit back like he knew exactly what had to happen. He had no clue, but he had to be an expert. He had to figure it out. And I know that we would go back home afterwards, and he'd get out his books and he'd start looking up, you know, regulations on how the grades had to be and how to, you know, different, you know, if you did a perk test and how you have to dig the holes the right way and all this stuff. He had no idea when he'd first go out there. He'd see the job. But the customer can't know that. You have to solve the problem for the customer. Even if you don't know how, it's your job to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that if you really don't want to do just run-of-the-mill stuff, it's really your job to know. And just like, I mean, when they called me today and told me that there was a change, and he was asking me, "Can you handle that?" Well, yeah, I can. I mean, I'm perfectly capable of it, but it's going to change a lot of things. And I started explaining it to him, and then he just wanted to throw $250 at me, you know, to cover permits. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. I'm like, there's another whole different ball game. I'm like, I know it's only 106 wide, like you said, but we're talking oversize. There's more risk. We're working on our oversize schedules now, and this is what our rates are. And it's a lot of education every time, but yeah, I don't know everything. There's a lot of stuff I got to look up, you know, because he was asking me, well, you can drive at night. I said, I'm pretty sure I can. I think it's dusk till dawn, even though it's not that big. And that's always something that you don't know, but you can't let them know that. You got to, you know, just go straight on with it like you know what you're talking about.
That's right. And then you have to figure it out. You have to figure out what the actual rules are and solve the problem. So, all right, Chris, I appreciate the call. I'm going to put you back on hold. I've got 2 other calls to get to, and then we'll wrap it up after that. We're going to go to the 901 area code. Welcome to the show. What's your name, and how can we help you?
Hey, good evening, Kenny. My name's Josh, and I appreciate you taking my call. I'm a relatively new cat. I'm gonna go on the other side of most of the conversations you've had so far tonight. I've been listening to you for a while, for about 2 months, I guess. I picked you up on the podcast until they ended. But I've been learning a lot over the last few months, and I'm a retired military guy. I did 26 years in the service. Retired about 2 years ago. I own a couple businesses totally unrelated to the transportation industry, but I found myself kind of yearning for the travel that I had in the military. So I told my wife, I said, I need to find something to do. So about 2 months ago, I started doing the RV transport gig up out of Indiana. And it was an easy way. Yeah, it was an easy way to get going. And I learned a lot. But I also learned very quickly that there's not any money in it. And so I decided to kind of maybe dial it up a notch. So, again, kind of paid attention to a lot of the information that's out there. And I feel like I'm not saying I'm a genius, but I feel like I'm a smart enough guy to figure stuff out. And like you said, problem solve. I did it for almost 3 decades in the military. You don't have an option to just fire people. You got to figure stuff out. So
That's right.
what I did was I went and applied for my own authority, which may seem premature and all that, but like I said, I'm willing to learn and I'm willing to ease into it. I have no desires whatsoever to do anything more than one truck, one driver. And when I say one truck, I'm talking a hot shot setup, 1-ton dually,
Okay.
and a 40-foot type gooseneck. I did earn my CDL last week. I was able to get insurance with the truck and trailer setup that I just mentioned. Your numbers were pretty good, although I think you may have been referring to a semi. My Dodge, or not Dodge, my Ford F-350 and 40-foot gooseneck is going to run me about $12,800 for a year. And my insurance broker said that was actually a pretty good rate for a new guy. So I said, yeah, let's roll with it. So anyway, that's where I'm at. I think my authority goes live this week. I dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's. The insurance was the last thing I had to lock down. But here's my question. I'm finally getting to my question.
Okay.
I apologize for the intro there. But my question has to do with factoring. You mentioned it before. I think you've mentioned it in previous episodes I've listened to, and my first impression of factoring was something similar to like a payday loan.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very turned off by it, and as you know, as soon as you apply for that authority, your phone starts going crazy, and everybody's trying to be your best friend and get a piece of the pie, so to speak. So I basically ignored most of them phone calls. Well, I did get one gentleman on the phone who was nice enough to, I said, you know what, let me ask you a question. He was from a factoring company. And I said, let me just throw this at you. I said, I don't think I need factoring. And I told him, I said, I got about somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000 saved up for this venture. But tell me why I need factoring. And he said to me, he said, Josh, he said, several guys do use factoring even if they have the money, because for 3% non-recourse, it's worth it. It takes the headache of chasing down people for pay and to get paid so quick, and just to put it out of your mind and not worry about it. On a $3,000 load, 3% is $90. I tend to agree with that mentality. Am I wrong in thinking that? Is my logic wrong? I'm not doing it because I need the money necessarily, but I don't want the headache of having to chase somebody down. And week after week, you're doing loads after loads. I can imagine in 30 or 45 days, trying to keep track of all those invoices might become cumbersome. So anyway, that's my question. Sorry for the long wind.
No problem. Here we go. Factoring. This could be, I could do a whole show on this. I've done whole shows on this. You just set me off here. So let's go back. First of all, thank you for your service. 26 years. What branch were you in?
I was in the Navy. I was an EOD tech for 26 years.
Okay. Well, I won't hold it against you. So, I'm Army strong myself. So, but now I understand. Now I understand where you're coming from. Okay. So,
all right.
Yeah, we're all on the same team. Anyway,
Yep.
Factoring. It is very similar to a payday loan. So let me tell you, first of all, non-recourse does not really exist. Okay. So here's how non-recourse programs work. They sound good. And if they were as good as they sound, if they provided the protection that they claim, they would be fantastic, and I'd be more for them. But they don't. Here's what happens.
Okay.
Typically, there are time frames that everything has to happen within. All right? So you deliver the load. Let's say you deliver the load on the 1st, and you send in the invoice on the 1st of the month. Most of the time, the contract will read such as the broker, you're protected as long as the broker files bankruptcy or goes out of business within 30 days of you sending in that invoice, okay? So if you send in the invoice and the next day the broker goes out of business, you're protected, all right? So your $90 is well worth it because you're protected. What happens, though, is no factoring company, is going to take a risk like that. It would be stupid for a factoring company to advance you money if they thought that the broker was not going to pay, if they were going to go out of business. So if there's any indication that that broker is going out of business, they won't fund the money. They're not going to buy that invoice from you.
Okay.
So what happens is, in the beginning, and even if it's 60 days, 90 days, whatever your agreement says, there's going to be a time frame. So in the beginning, if you send in an invoice and they buy it in the first few, and your days to pay might be 30, 35 days. Over time, that broker starts getting, a poor credit history. Their days to pay become 40 days, 45 days, 50 days. By then, the broker is insolvent. The factoring company will stop buying the invoices from you. The broker is still working.
Okay.
They're still out there, and they're moving freight for another 6 months after that. Then they go bankrupt. So that you're protected, because by the time they go bankrupt, your invoice has been paid. Okay? So you're good.
Right.
Because you didn't lose anything. They're not going to give you money. They're not going to buy an invoice from you if there's a chance of that broker going out of business. It'd be a very, very small chance. Okay?
Sure.
On the other side of that, if you were in a full recourse program where they could buy it, they could back charge you or whatever, where they don't cover it, they're still going to tell you that the broker has bad credit, and they still won't advance you the money because they're still taking a risk. They're taking a risk then that the broker won't pay the invoice, and you won't be able to reimburse them if they go under. Okay, so they're still taking that risk, so they won't buy it either. So either way, you have that level of protection. Chances are non-recourse is never going to protect you, the actual provision for non-recourse.
Okay.
Non-recourse is a bit of a scam. Okay, so I don't recommend anybody go out and jump on it just for that type of protection. Now, you mentioned the other thing. Yeah, when you have, 30, 40 invoices outstanding, keeping track of all that, it can be cumbersome. When you only have 1 or 2 trucks, 3, maybe even 4 trucks, that should be manageable. One person, even if you're still driving, should be able to manage that. Elizabeth and I were, driving. I did all the invoice and everything, and we managed that. And I do factor. Full disclosure, I do use a factoring company at this point. But, I never in a million years would have signed a contract for 3%. That's horrible. Once I got up to 4 trucks, I started factoring, and I got a significantly better rate, less than half of the 3%. Okay? So then it starts to make a little more sense, and then you start looking at those other things you mentioned. Now I've got 4 or 5 trucks running. They're all doing 4 or 5 loads a week. I might have 20, 25 invoices every week. I might have 150 a month outstanding. Now it gets to be cumbersome, especially at that point I was still in the truck. There's a lot going on. Having a single point of contact, they do have the people that are following up, making calls on the, an invoice is 35, 40 days. They're calling to follow up and collect that money for you. There is a benefit to it. The other stuff, non-recourse, is not a reason to do it. Okay? It's maybe if you get the right rate, it might be one of those extra things they throw in, but I would not do it for that alone. Other features that they offer, most of them offer fuel cards. The fuel card programs that most of them offer are, you can find better discounts in a lot of other ways. Nasdaq's discounts better than most. If you were to work with some of the bigger brokers, Landstar, Mercer, England, Knight, they all offer fuel programs. All of those programs are better than any factoring company I've ever seen is going to offer. Let's see, what else do they offer? Credit checks. Credit checks, can be beneficial, but the credit check, you got to take it with a grain of salt anyway. First of all, you're going to have it. If you're booking freight off of a load board, you're going to see the credit and days to pay typically posted right there in the load board. Oftentimes, that's all you really see if you look at the credit check service that the factoring companies offer. Days to pay and, a check mark, go or no go. You're not going to be able to tell much from that report. If it's a direct customer and so forth, you could just pay $30 and run an Experian or a Dun & Bradstreet, credit check report on them and do a one-time deal and you're done. So credit checks, I could take it or leave it. Not really a benefit there either.
Yeah.
So
So one thing you mentioned that was kind of on my radar, and really, again, I'm trying to keep this very simple while I try to learn this. I'm not trying to get in over my head, or like somebody else mentioned, get my head over the skis, so to speak. I really want to keep it simple and dumb it down real good until I get. So I subscribe to a load board. I'm on a trial. I might as well, and I got the membership through. Or a discounted rate on the load board subscription based on a membership to one of the organizations, OIDA.
Yeah, OIDA. Yep, I know.
So I was able to save a little money on that. So you know which load board I don't know if I can say things like that on your show.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time.
I'll just say who it is.
DAT,
okay, so
DAT, Members Edge, Truckers Edge. Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's what I'm on, and so I haven't yet. I'm still, like I said, I don't have my authority for a few more days, so I haven't actually made that first. I haven't popped the cork on this yet. I haven't called a broker yet, but I do go through. I live in Memphis, Tennessee, so I'm looking at loads that qualify for 40 foot in length, less than 15,000 pounds. Things that I can haul flatbed. And so I see this little green check mark, and every time I click it, it goes to a company called Triumph.
Triumph Business Capital. Yep.
I called them and I said, hey, so what's the deal? What's the green check? And I kind of knew the answer before I called, but I wanted to hear them say it. And she basically told me that if it's got a green check, they're good to go. And so it took a little bit of the fear of, oh my gosh, they're going to go out of business, or I'm going to be chasing money down, or the non-recourse. Because what you said about the non-recourse is exactly what she explained. It's really not non-recourse. It's non-recourse if they go belly up right away, or you're only good for about 90 days, and after that, they're going to come back after you.
Right.
So the non-recourse isn't really non-recourse. So you're absolutely right on that, and I forgot to mention that. But so anyway, what I'm driving at is really the convenience factor is really what it boils down to. If there's a green check and they're already vetted with a big load board, if they're affiliated with them and they're on every single load I see practically, then I would think that there's a reason for that, and their affiliation is something they would hold near and dear and wouldn't want to screw that up. So it's not so much I'm worried about them not paying. It's more a matter of convenience. Is the 3% worth the convenience of not chasing it down? So if I'm hearing you correctly, I should be able to chase it down for a while until I get overloaded. And 3% you think is an exorbitant amount of interest rate. I looked at it like $90 sounded like nothing off of $3,000, but I guess my perspective on it is obviously a lot different, not knowing anything. So,
well, let's put it this way: my mom and dad both. I mentioned my dad worked for General Motors before he did that excavating thing for a while. My mom worked for the post office. They were hourly employees, union employees, right? Okay. The post office, for example, breaks their hourly clock down to 100 units, not 60 minutes, but 100 units. And I remember that my mom got a raise of like a couple pennies an hour, right? And it worked out to be a few $100 a year. It might have been I'd have to think back. I want to say it might have been like $2,000 a year, but it was like the next level pay raise, and it was worthy of a celebration. It was a big deal. And it's like fractions of a penny per unit, per minute, and it's a big deal. In this industry, we don't deal with pennies per unit, per minute, or whatever. We deal with $100 bills, and we throw it out the window like it's nothing. If you did one of these, if you did $100 a week, if you did that $3,000 load, and you could save $100 a week, that's $5,000 a year. That's a big deal. A lot of first year owner operators, especially if they get their own authority and so forth, $50,000 in the first year could be, that might be in the ballpark of what you make. $5,000 is 10%. You could get a 10% increase in your rate, in your bottom line by not factoring. It's 3% off the top, but it's 10% of your profits, right? It works out to be a much bigger increase. So be very, very careful with that. The other 3%. Remember, most brokers are paying now in 30 to 35 days. At least that's what the window they should be. Some of mine are up in the 45-day, month and a half. 3% over 30 days is equivalent to 36% interest. Okay, and at no point do you ever have, I've had people say, well, I factored $250,000 and it was only 3% of $250,000. Well, that's not the case at all. You factored, roughly $20,000 a month is what you factored, right? A little over $20,000 a month. You could have taken, and then the broker paid it back at the end of the month, and you took out another $20,000. So you just had this revolving loan of $20,000. At the end of the year, you paid 3% of the $250,000, but that works out to 36% of that $20,000 revolving loan that you had the whole time, right? So you could actually take out a $20,000 line of credit or personal loan and fund your whole business the exact same way. And, you never have more than $20,000 outstanding. You'd always be getting that money back, and you would only pay 4 or 5%. You could do this whole thing on a credit card. Take a credit card out, and if you paid it back every 30 days, you pay 0%. Okay, so run your business, maybe do a few quick pays in the beginning to get your cash flow up. Cash flow $5,000, $10,000. Get yourself a week or two ahead. Run everything through a credit card. Buy all your fuel with a credit card. Before the bill is due, pay it in full, cash. Pay it off. You funded your whole business at 0% interest. It's not necessary to factor at all.
So I totally hear what you're saying, and I'm going to tell you why I had a little bit of a different perspective. Again, this isn't really about the money. I'm not to get into my personal finances or anything, but like I said, I own a couple businesses, and I am retired, and I have a good pension. I make enough money. This was really just a way of just sort of focusing on what I thought was important, which was finding the loads and learning how to drive safely and log my hours and do basically do all that. And here's why I thought the 3%, because I own a couple other businesses. Both of those businesses take credit cards. Okay.
Right.
So when you come to me and you buy something from me, and let's say I sell landscape equipment, I sell trailers and so forth. And when you buy something from me and you put it on a credit card, guess what? I'm getting hit with about 3% of a convenience fee, and I don't always carry that over to the customer. Sometimes I do, but
I want you to think about that for a second.
And so to me, I just looked at it.
Which way is that money flowing? Okay, who is paying who, and who is taking the hit when you do that? The customer pays you, you take a hit, right? The customer is paying you, you take a hit.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
So now the broker is paying you, right? The broker pays you, and you take a hit. So I mean, it's kind of all these transactions are a little backwards in the trucking business, right?
Yeah, it does sound a little backwards, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So who should be absorbing that extra money? So it is similar to a credit card. It is similar to the way a credit card works, but it's just a matter of, and cash is king. Believe me, the other side of this is having that cash flow. If you can take that money and invest it in something that's earning you more than 3% a month, absolutely. In my case, I was able to early on add trucks faster, and if I could add a truck, if it cost me $300 a month to factor that money, but it allowed me to add a truck that was able to bring in $3,000 a month extra revenue, it made sense. But it's also you gotta weigh the pros and cons. I know people that are factoring money at 3% to put it in a 10% savings account, their retirement account. So they're factoring money at 36% APR to put it into a 10% APR savings account. That doesn't make any sense at all.
That's not wise.
No.
No.
So.
No, that's not smart.
But I am going to let you go.
That's
I do appreciate the call.
I appreciate you taking the call, and you're doing a good job, Kenny, and I enjoy listening to you. And I enjoy the no fluff. You just get to the point, and you deliver good information, and that's a little unique, as from what I can hear across the.
Well, I appreciate.
So I appreciate you getting.
I tried.
And put.
Oh, and I didn't mean to cut you off there. Sorry about that. I do try to get to the point. Some people don't appreciate that about me. I'm not. I'm straight to business. I'm a doer. One final call, and we'll wrap things up. I wanted to make this a short show tonight, but here we are. We're 40 minutes in overtime. We're going to go to the 765 area code. 765, welcome to the show. How can we help you?
I'm just glad to talk to you finally after listening to you as much as I have. I just got a pretty simple question, maybe a little extra, but what happens if you are involved in a freight claim?
Okay.
I am a new carrier. Green is all get out, and everything is coming together quite good. The last 90 days, I can't complain. Things have been good. But one thing that's always worried me in the back of my mind is what's going to happen. I'm sure eventually something's going to happen with the freight. And I know that you said that, brokers can pull some pretty dirty tricks on, holding your money back and everything. I just wonder, what is the usual course of events if something does get damaged?
All right. Well, this is another topic I could do a whole show on. And I am going to be having Brad Allen from Hadley and Leiden on. I think his cousin is also going to be coming on. They run Hadley and Leiden Insurance here in Florida. These would be good questions for them. But let me take it with what I can tell you. First of all, you're fairly new. Do you read the contracts? Do you read all the rate confirmations? Do you read the broker carrier agreements closely?
Yeah, and I found some stuff that I don't like. A lot of it's electronic too, and it's hard to really, make very many changes, I guess.
I agree, but one of the things that you should do is ask them for a paper copy so you can make changes, and ask them, try to negotiate some of the terms with them. Some of the terms, almost everything that you have to worry about is, a broker could work with you with no contract whatsoever because the regulations and the rules under 49 USC and the Carmack Amendment lay out the broker-carrier relationship. It explains how long the broker has to pay you. It explains how freight claims work. It explains everything. It explains who's responsible for what. The only reason brokers have you fill out a contract is to make the carrier waive all of those protections, okay? That's really the only reason that a broker has to do any of that stuff, all right? So one of the major things when it comes to freight claims is the right of offset. Almost every broker carrier agreement out there has the right of offset. They also have, indemnity clauses, which means you indemnify and hold harmless for any losses. Between those two things right there, if there is any freight claim whatsoever, even so much as a notation that there might be a freight claim on your proof of delivery, the broker doesn't have to pay you a penny of anything they owe you. What I mean by that is, let's say that you have one broker that you work with exclusively and you get fantastic rates, and somehow that broker, you've worked with them for several weeks in a row, you've invoiced them, and you have $100,000 outstanding with that particular broker, okay? Now you're hauling these widgets, and these widgets are, the value of this load that's on your trailer, the whole load is worth $50. Okay, that's the whole value of everything on your trailer. And when you get to the receiver, the cardboard box that this $50 load is packaged in, it just doesn't look quite right to this receiver. All right, and they notate that on the bill, and they say possible damages for this $50 load. The whole trailer load is $50. Right, possible damages on your proof of delivery. When you send that to the broker with the right of offset, they have the right to hold every penny that they owe you until that freight claim is closed. The receiver has 9 months to file a claim. Once they file a claim, it'll open up. They have 2 years to go to court and battle it out, which means almost 3 years that broker could hold every penny of that $100,000 that you've accrued over the past several months of working for that broker. So that's one thing that you need to be very careful of, and extend credit wisely and understand how these claims work, and make sure, and it's in most broker carrier agreements. And they will hold that freight rate if, you're not careful. TQL is pretty well known for it. They use that, they hold hundreds, millions of dollars from people all the time. They're very well known for flexing their muscle on that right of offset clause. But most brokers have that in there. Even if you don't have that one, if you indemnify and hold them harmless, it still gives them the right to do that type of thing. They also have clauses about salvage clauses. If, let's say you delivered a load of lettuce to a grocery store, a grocery chain, they refused it for whatever reason. Now with produce, oftentimes these produce shippers and receivers and things, they'll refuse product just because they overordered. And they'll say, well, I'm refusing it because it's Tuesday afternoon and we don't receive on Tuesday afternoon. Take the load back to where you got it. And they might say something more along the lines of, well, the temperature was off by 1 degree, or, something just doesn't look right. The product isn't, visually appealing or something, and they'll send it back. That's huge with things right now. Watermelons are coming into full swing. Watermelons might be perfectly fine, but the box they're in might be damaged. They'll reject the whole load for that. Okay? So when that happens, carriers without a broker carrier agreement have the right of salvage, which means you could take those watermelons or that load of lettuce or whatever it is, you could go around the corner and you could sell it to a different receiver and try to recoup the freight. And then the difference you'd have to, send to the shipper, receiver, whoever the benefiting party was. But you could get your freight bill by selling the freight. It's called the right of salvage. All right? You have that right. Most of the time, the broker carrier agreements make you waive it. So what I'm getting at is the first step in a freight claim is understand exactly what is in your broker carrier agreement and all the contracts that are associated with that load. That's the first place you have to start. Once you know what you're allowed to do, what you can do, what you can't do, and mind you, even if you're allowed to by contract, the broker might still do their own thing, and that contract would have to be enforced in a court of law. So the broker might still try to hold your money or still try to get you to do something else. Other common ones that you need to be careful of is they oftentimes will say that the carrier is responsible to return the freight or disposing of the freight at their own cost. So, but at the broker or shipper's direction. So you could take a load of watermelons from Miami, Florida to Seattle, Washington. They get rejected on the other end, and that broker says you have to take them back to the shipper in Miami, but you have to do it at your own cost. Okay? That could be in the contract. So be very careful about that as well. Anyway, small print in the contracts is kind of how freight claims get handled. Now, on the insurance side, here's what happens. Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. First of all, if you can keep your insurance company out of it, that's the best. All right? So if it's a $50 claim, just pay the $50 out of your pocket. All right? If it's a $1,000 claim, couple $1,000, and you need to turn it in your insurance company, your insurance company will put their adjusters on it. And basically, they will do a full investigation of what happened and why. If there is legal recourse and they can hold the shipper or receiver accountable, maybe they loaded bad product, that type of thing. Your insurance company will have the attorneys and have the muscle to make things happen. That's why you have insurance. Okay, so, don't be afraid to use your insurance. Don't use it except for a last resort, but don't be afraid because your insurance company is on your side. When you have a freight claim, what happens is they're going to notate it on the bill of lading. You're going to contact the broker. The broker's probably going to hold all of the money that they owe you. You're going to need to turn it over to your insurance company. They're going to do the investigation. They're going to settle the claim. They're either going to pay it or they're going to deny it. If the insurance company denies it, chances are the broker will just hold your money indefinitely, or they'll take the difference out of your money. You may have to go to court to resolve that, or the shipper may have to come after you for payment. Oftentimes what happens is, let's say you have a $1,000 load, but the damages are $500. Oftentimes they'll make a settlement agreement with you, and they'll just hold the $500 out of your freight bill. If your claim exceeds the $1,000 or exceeds your freight bill, that's when they may try to offset that with other freight bills that you've hauled for them, or they'll try to get a check from your insurance company, or they'll offer to let you just pay them out of pocket. But that's essentially, kind of how it's going to work. And obviously there's a lot more to it than that. Like I said, I could do a whole show on this, and we'll talk about this more when my insurance guys are on. But is that this, does that kind of answer your question, or did you have more specific questions about it?
No, that pretty much got the broad scope of what I was asking, and I'll leave you be. I appreciate all that you do, though, man. You've been a great inspiration to me.
Well, I appreciate that, and, I'm glad, I wish you the best success, and, congratulations taking the leap and getting out there and taking the risk and doing the hard work. So with that, thank you very much for calling, and for everybody that's still with us, thank you all for joining me. All right, and there's some other questions. If you have anything further, check us out on Facebook, the Trucking with Authority group. I posted the video in the groups, and there's some discussions going on over there, some other questions. Obviously, I am way over time, so I'm not going to be able to get to any more questions tonight, but thank you all for joining us, and remember to dream big, aim high, strategize your plan, get out there and earn your success, because you don't deserve it. You've got to earn it, because only you drive you. Have a good night, everybody, and we will do it again next week.